Good evening, everybody. We're starting a little bit early, so we can get you to happy hour much faster, which is fantastic. But in all seriousness, it's great to be here on behalf of Uber and also the broader product marketing community in this room. It's been a really insightful day listening to everyone speak, and I think we can all generally agree we arrived with some good insights, but we're leaving with many more. So my hat's off to everyone who's stood up here before me and done such a great job presenting to us today. So today, we're going to talk about a few things related to building products and marketing experiences at Uber with the customer in mind. But I first wanted to set some context on the Uber business so you can kind of see the environment in which PMMs at Uber are building. Over the last decade, we've seen obviously tremendous growth in our marketplace since we launched in 2009. We're now in over 700 cities across 65 countries and on 6 continents, still waiting for that first ride request from Antarctica, but it'll come. We now have over 100 million active monthly platform users. So this is defined as someone taking a ride, ordering food, making a freight delivery, or riding a new modality instrument like a scooter or a bike. And also recently we surpassed 4 million people earning on our platform globally, which is quite substantial. That's more than the number of people who work for Walmart. That's also more than the number of people listed in the US military. So when you think about the scale of our platform, it's quite significant. And another metric that I'm quite proud of as a product marketer at Uber that is new as of this year is we recently cracked the top 100 of Interbrand's top global brands, which is really exciting. Number 87, we've got some work to do, but we're hoping to make that better in 2020. So we've obviously now scaled to something much bigger than a ride-sharing platform. And that makes the job of a PMM a little bit more difficult. The customer will now be quite different across all of these areas in which we're expanding our business. Ride-sharing is still important, makes up the majority of our gross bookings globally. However, Eats is in hyper-growth mode. We are now investing in new modalities like bikes and scooters. Uber Freight is growing in Europe. We have also transit integrations in the Uber app, which I've been using and enjoying in London, which is quite helpful. And then, of course, future bets that obviously catch a lot of headlines, autonomous vehicle development, and then our vertical takeoff and landing aerial flight service, which we'll start piloting next year in select cities around the world. And underneath all of this, we have a school of teams that is supporting the business on these platform bets. The marketplace controls pricing. Maps and routing controls your ETAs and dispatch of driver to come pick you up as a rider. Payments, which is something that I focus on as a product marketer at Uber. That controls all of the inflows and outflows of money on our platform, which is billions of dollars a month. Safety and trust, ensuring that you as a user feel safe every time you get into a car, no matter where you're traveling in the world. And then data to build better products and experiences. So with this in mind, I often have to ask myself, who are our customers? And it really does vary by the line of business that you're working on. But now we're starting to see some common threads of users using multiple products across our platform, which makes the product marketing challenge a little bit greater, but also a meaty challenge for us to dive into. So I wanted to share a couple of our core Uber product marketing values, which should look very familiar to you, hopefully. Anytime a new product marketer walks through the door, these are some of the values that are instilled within them on day one. I think we've heard a little bit about this today already. So number one, we are the voice of the user to product and tech teams. The number of times that we've had to come in and champion the user with product and engineering teams is numerous, but they're getting better. In Uber's early days, it was much more about shipping as fast as we can with little regard for what the customer need actually is, because in hypergrowth, you just go. Fortunately, we're no longer in that situation today. From a customer mindset point of view, we can actually champion the user and get ahead of that. And then conversely, product marketers are the voice of the product to our users. So every time you interact with the app, you see a message in the app, you pass by an out-of-home display board at the bus stop or the tube. That is all something that is PMM controlled. Of course, we are left-brained and right-brained, highly analytical. We can distill large data sets, but we're also empathetic and creative, and that manifests in a lot of the campaigns you see out in the wild. And then, of course, we build for business impact at scale, and scale is probably the toughest part about the scope of work that PMMs undertake at Uber. Over 65 countries, 700 cities. How do you build features and products that are going to scale effectively across all of these diverse groups when the audience has such diverse needs? So it wouldn't be a product marketing summit without a framework, and I wanted to join in on the fun and share one of our own. So at the core, product marketing at Uber, we focus on owning our adoption metrics, product adoption metrics. And there's a couple fundamental questions we have to ask before we sign up for specific OKRs and the KPIs that go along with them. Who are we building for? What value does the product actually have in the user's life? And then how will users discover it? So where this starts is usually in a problem space we're all familiar with. Who is it for? And what is the business impact that it could possibly have? So in this insights definition phase, this is where we partner with our PMs, with our UX research team, with other marketing cross-functional partners to really dig in and understand what our learning agenda is in actually speaking to customers to understand what they need. Once we have our insights defined and our research initiative out the door, we can come back and actually start a product requirements document. We know who we're building for. We have some directional insights. Now let's put together a document that actually clarifies and crystallizes what we're going to build. And while the PM is writing a PRD, this is often when I kick off my own marketing brief. And oftentimes some of my marketing brief inputs are inputs to the PRD as well. The two things that come to mind for me when I'm developing a marketing brief are, number one, what is the business impact that this campaign could have? And number two, what is the user need or the market gap that this is going to fill? With the PRD and the marketing brief now complete, we're ready to go to market. And of course, that marketing brief will enable creative kickoffs, engagement with other cross-functional partners across the company. It will have outlines for positioning, messaging pillars, all of the things that you need to develop a strategic campaign. We are far from done, though, once we launch. And at Uber, this is especially true. You might remember the previous slide, 700 cities, 65 countries. How are we going to build a campaign that scales outside of London or New York or Mumbai? This is where we lean on our regional teams, our operations teams on the ground to equip us with insights that actually help define or refine positioning and messaging within a campaign on the ground. So before we are ready to officially grow a product in a market, we often partner with those teams on the ground to playbook our campaign and ensure that everyone is speaking the same language about the feature when it lands in a market. So to get back to customer obsession and why it's so important at Uber, I just wanted to take a moment to define how we think of insights at the company. So there's really three categories in which we are distilling insights from a very wide funnel. Number one is behavioral. This describes the motivations or behaviors behind something we observe through research. An example I can give you is we have a payments product in the United States called Instant Pay, where our drivers can cash out their earnings up to 5 times per day on a debit card linked to their account. And when I saw the data that reflected drivers were actually hitting this maximum several times a week, I was curious why that could be the case. At Uber, we are famous for championing weekly payments. Drivers get their payment on a weekly cadence instead of monthly like much of Europe or bi-weekly like North America. So when we dug into the data and we actually talked to customers, we understood that there are on-platform expenses that need to be taken care of during the course of a day driving on the platform. Petrol, lunch, other miscellaneous car maintenance that you have to take care of. These are things that are really important and not understood through data, but understood through conversation. So those are behavioral insights. Market insights, competitive trends, what's happening in investment in the space. An example that we looked at recently with the launch of Uber Money last month was the amount of fintech investing happening across the world, specifically in LATAM. So that was a key insight for us to understand that there's actually a market opportunity for us to start offering financial services to a lot of our customers in that market. And then finally, and probably most importantly, is usability. When we put a surface or a feature or an app in front of a customer, how are they engaging with it? Is comprehension high or low? what is the feedback cycle? So these are insights that really drive a lot of our product marketing and product development at Uber. So I want to deliver a few tactical recommendations on things that I've used in the last 3.5 years working at Uber that I've found really useful as we've kind of built out our research functions, our marketing functions that were pretty nascent at the time that I joined in 2016. This one might seem obvious, but anytime you're entering a new research phase, I find it imperative to develop and socialize a study guide with all the stakeholders who are going to be impacted by the product you're about to set off and build, or the insights you're about to discover. This is a great way to unify everyone toward a common objective before you even get to a PRD, before you even get to a marketing brief or a go-to-market possibility. Some of the things that went into one of the study guides that I built on the lead up to the Uber Money launch last month and the year preceding it were mapping key objectives around what were the opportunities we were trying to solve for, number one, our customers, and then number two, the market. How can we get some business growth out of investing in this space? What are the themes that we already know related to payments experiences on the Uber platform? How can we validate those? Or how can we pressure test those? What methodologies are we going to use in our research? Qualitative, quantitative, ethnography? Recruitment. How are we looking at our data to ensure we're selecting the right users to participate in a study, which is arguably the most important thing you can do. You want to identify a broad set of users to participate, but also make sure you're selecting the right group that is going to give you pushback on your preconceived notions. Logistically speaking, who is your translator on the ground? Who is sending out the emails to recruit drivers to join the facility and actually participate at a roundtable with you? Who's rewarding them? There's all of these details to think through before you even kick off your first question during a roundtable. And then finally the team, which we'll get into in just a moment. Who's actually attending on the ground research? We're starting to champion more of a cross-functional group attending research around the world. Not just product marketers, not UXR, not designers, not PMs, but engineers, data scientists. How do we get everyone involved to get closer to the customer? Quick straw poll. So by a show of hands, how many of you are sharing insights during a research initiative before it wraps? So before it completes, you're actively sharing out. Okay, a few, it's good. How many of you are sharing only when your research wraps and you've actually synthesized your research, you're ready to share your findings, you're feeling good? Cool. A lot more of you. How many of you are never sharing? Okay, good. That would have been a wrong answer. So one thing we have done at Uber to make insight gathering and subsequent shareouts a little bit more interesting and interactive is leverage tools like Google+, RIP, to share out real-time insights during research as it's happening. And this is a great way to engage cross-functional teams who aren't on the ground, but still have an interest in what you guys are doing. In 2017, we were rewriting the entire code base for the Uber Driver app. And we dispatched a team of, I think it was 11 researchers to 10 different countries over 3 weeks to get qualitative feedback on the new app rewrite that we were putting in front of customers as a beta for the first time. And this is when research at Uber went viral, because everyone was participating. Everyone was so interested to see what was happening in these sessions that we even had C-level executives posting on Google Plus asking questions. So it was a great engagement tool to get people involved and interested in what we were actually trying to accomplish. Another thing to do is actually get in the shoes of your customer. About 150 of us in Amsterdam last summer signed up to be Uber Eats couriers. And of the 20 or so trips that I completed, I received 0 tips. So I need better training before I go out on my next delivery. But this is a great way to get into the customer's shoes. And it's very unique at Uber. You think about the digital world meeting the physical world and the challenges that provides to someone who's in the moment, who pulls it down a one-way street accidentally, who goes to the wrong door to deliver a meal. There are logistics on the ground that you just can't conquer digitally that need human interaction. So these are great ways to build empathy with the experience that you've built digitally, and then also file a massive number of bug reports that we did that day for the engineering team because we found a lot of gaps. I don't think there's been a carpentry metaphor delivered today. Maybe there has. I might have missed it. But measure twice, cut once. And what I mean by this is we often rest our caps on a range of qualitative insight with a relatively small group of people. And I think there's a lot of value that can come from that. I just think it should expand. And at a company like Uber, where scale means everything, I have to validate across a much wider group of customers. When I did qualitative research for the Uber Money brand prior to launching in 2019, I found a lot of general support for offering drivers debit cards, finding ways to give our earners on our platform access to their earnings faster. But I knew that was going to be very different by market. So while I had a nice, diverse, qualitative set of findings, I still needed a way to reach more customers, understand nuances by market, which would inform our go-to-market strategy. So I issued a survey to understand not so much about UX or usability, but more about perception and trust. Uber's reputation is vastly different market by market. In the US, a driver would say, absolutely not. I would never use one of those products. But a driver in India would say, 100%, I will sign up the day you launch it. So there are very, very important cultural nuances to get out of your research. And that's definitely something we do through all of the quantitative efforts that we do post-qual. What do you do once you have a set of insights? How do you make sure that all of this customer obsession work is actually being captured somewhere where you can share it, store it, and it doesn't lose its value over time? This is where building a knowledge base comes in handy. At Uber, we had teams all around the world conducting their own research. And at times it was very confusing to understand who had done what. Were the insights actually valuable? Were they usable? Did they talk to the right users? In a scrappy startup environment, that'll happen, and that's okay. But finding a champion who will build a knowledge base for you, it doesn't have to be something where you dedicate engineering hours or time to do so. It can be a Google Drive folder, well organized, of course. But building a knowledge base is really important to communicate to your internal stakeholders that you have a pre-existing set of insights to tap into when you're in the PRD stage, when you're in the marketing brief stage, something that you can leverage that already exists. At Uber, our fantastic UXR team built a tool called Kaleidoscope. And this is a searchable database where we can go in and select topics, customer types, regions, and functions, and sort by digestible insights. This is a hugely valuable tool for me as a product marketer. Again, there can be versions of this that are much smaller, much easier to build. Doesn't mean you don't have to be at a Fortune 5 to get this. You can be at a startup and build it in Google Drive yourself. I've done it as well. But having a single source of truth for where you are actually delivering these insights is really important. This is typically something reserved for designers or PMs, but I'm starting to see a lot more PMMs at Uber lead design sprints. And the great thing is there's a lot of open source help about how to do this out there in the wild already. I had the chance to lead a design sprint with drivers in San Francisco last year at what we call the Driver Advisory Forum. We bring in 40 to 50 drivers from across the United States with varying unique needs or time of service on the platform, ratings, earnings, etc., to get a better understanding of how they operate and what's important to them. So again, in the lead up to the Uber Money launch, I sat down and had a financial planning session with a group of drivers. And we do this in a design sprint format. One of my favorite exercises was simply having our drivers draw a pie chart, think about your weekly earnings or daily earnings on the Uber platform, and tell me how you spend them. And I think the most jarring one for me working in payments was none of it was being saved. It was all being spent on life's expenses or operating expenses. And that's where these insights started to hit home, and we knew we needed to do more and do it better. And the last one I'll leave you with should look familiar. Test, learn, refine, measure, repeat. Oftentimes what customers say isn't actually what they do in practice. I think a lot of you can probably relate to that. So when you have a great batch of insights and you've built a product and you've built a campaign, and then you go to market and it flops, sometimes you wonder why, and it happens. But how can you rebound? How can you put new messages into market? How can you use different channels to understand what isn't resonating and what is not? And a lot of times what our UXR counterparts will do when they see a limited rollout be unsuccessful is they'll actually cold call customers and say, you are interacting with this experience in a really funky way. What's going on? And surprisingly, they're very open to giving us feedback, and that's a fantastic resource for us to have. Sometimes I will go down to what is called the Greenlight Hub, which are underneath some of the Uber offices where drivers go to sign up for the platform, get their vehicle inspection checks to make sure they're good to go. And I'll just sit in the waiting room and have conversations around certain features that I'm working on or that we're piloting to give them a real-time test while they're waiting to update their registration. So there's all these fantastic avenues to continue testing, learning, refining, measuring the impact, and continuing. Another resource that I lean heavily on is, once I've launched a feature, is contextual in-app awareness surveys and sentiment reading. So when we recently relaunched the Uber debit card, we wanted to understand, how are you engaging with it? What do you think? Is there anything else we could be offering? And the response rate to these is tremendous. And it's a great service for us to utilize to get learnings as PMMs to take back to our product teams and make improvements. So just a quick recap. I know that was fast. So first one, a study guide, having a learning agenda and making sure that's socialized is hugely important. I found a lot of success that way. It makes your research process go a lot smoother, identifying the stakeholders you want involved, who your subjects are, all of those really important details. Make insight gathering interactive. Find channels in which you can distribute insights in the real time instead of waiting for all of that hard synthesis work and doing one share out around a table. Measure twice, cut once. Validate your qualitative findings in quantitative research. Build a knowledge base. Find a repository in which you can store and reuse insights over time. Lead a design sprint. Find ways to get your cross-functional partners involved early to rally around a common objective before you even start building your product. And finally, test, learn, refine, measure, which is a constant loop that we're all intimately familiar with. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We have some questions. Can you take questions? Okay. Dan Wong would like to know, measure twice, cut once. How do you decide when is enough to dedicate resources to start building stuff at Uber?
That's a good question. How do you decide when is enough to dedicate resource to start building stuff? I think the good thing about Uber is we have enough resources to make side bets that actually turn into legitimate features. So experimentation is something that is championed across the product org, as well as the product marketing org. And I think that's a really encouraging system to be in, where we can actually take risks and say, we have a directional insight that we would like to validate in an experiment. Can we do it? Limited engineering time, we'll scope it out, and we'll launch it. So that sort of culture, that creative culture of testing and experimentation, as long as it's done in a contained environment, is encouraged. And we do a lot of that. So a lot of times we will measure once, actually, and lean in just a little bit. When we're going to go big, we absolutely measure twice and cut once.
At Intercom, they have this cupcake analogy where, like, instead of like doing the cake base and then the filling and then the icing and then realizing you have like a strawberry peanut butter cake, so you do the cupcake. Okay, how does your product marketing team cooperate with the marketing team?
Yeah, great question. So we've had a tremendous amount of change in our marketing organization over the last 12 months. Our CMO, Rebecca Messina, left the company earlier this year. We've had a lot of change at the C-suite with marketing. We had Thomas Renice recently move over to take over as the global marketing lead from Google after 10 years there, so we're super excited about that. Product marketing has historically actually reported into product until the time our first CMO joined. So we've been experiencing, I'll be honest, a little bit of whiplash in figuring out how we interact with all the functions. But the truth is the organization recognizes the value of product marketing because of the foundation that was laid in the early days when Laura Jones, our director, brought the function from Google and a lot of the tenants there within. So the operating model has gotten a lot better, actually. It used to be a little bit tough to work in. We had overlapping responsibilities. The regional teams would sometimes go do their own thing. While we wanted to build at scale, they wanted to do their own thing locally. We've developed processes and put them in place to better work together. So it's still an evolution, and given the change over the last year, we're still working on it. But product marketing is now on the map as a key decision maker in the marketing planning process, in the product roadmap development process, and that's really encouraging for the future of our function at Uber.
Sorry, did you just say you have input on the product roadmap?
Yes,
just checking.
Let's talk about that over beers, shall we? Yeah.
How did you incentivize drivers to partake in the design sprint?
Yeah, good question. There's a whole mapping exercise of incentives we can offer drivers. Sometimes it's Amazon gift cards. Sometimes it's the ability to have more quests built into when they drive, which means they can potentially earn more during the course of a week if they hit certain milestones. But a lot of times you'd be surprised how eager they are to give feedback. The number of times that I get into an Uber and I say, hey, I work for Uber, and then it just starts, right away. A good example is I landed at Heathrow. This is not this trip. I'm based in Amsterdam. When I fly, I usually fly into the city, but I flew into Heathrow one time, and I had a driver pick me up, and he had to pay for the parking ticket before we left. There was a whole snafu with where I was supposed to meet him, and I had to admit, this is not ideal for you at all. We need to do a better job. And then it was just let me tell you a little bit more about Heathrow. And then the whole thing it was an hour of that. So it's great. I love to hear it. So we don't really have to do much incentivizing. They are willing participants in giving feedback, which is fantastic for us. We sincerely appreciate it. And there's so many ways for us to get feedback from them. We do a lot of ride-alongs just in the course of our daily lives. We have official forums so they can come and sit around a table and have a airing of grievances, if you will. But we try to focus the conversations to have meaningful output and actually bring something back that's substantial for our product team. So a little bit of both, a little bit of non-incentive, a little bit of incentive.
Fantastic. Well, I think we'll end there because it's happy hour, and I would never want to keep anyone from that. And I know you wouldn't either. I'm sure Adam will be around to have a drink.
Yep.
So that is a wrap. I'm Ray. It's been a pleasure meeting some of you. I hope you'll come say hello to me, especially tomorrow when I'm not in the MC fog. But yeah, it's been a pleasure being here, and thanks for coming. Cheers.